Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome back to another live session on my Declassified Caribbean channel. Notice that I have changed my channel to Declassified Caribbean. So that is what we are now. So when you see that the name of the channel, please do not tune off. Declassified Caribbean is not what I'm working with. Thank you so much for joining. Good afternoon. How are you doing? Happy Easter to everyone. That is Marie Antoinette. Yeah, good evening. Good afternoon, in wherever you are. Please welcome to another live session on Declassified. I've changed the channel's name from Rumination News Network to Declassified Caribbean. So when you see me, please make sure that you click and you engage with the content. Thank you so much for joining. Now, today we are going to be looking at a very interesting topic. It's COVID, Iran, and the Great Reset. Is a new global order emerging? That is what we have to understand. Well, we understand that, we went through COVID. For those of you who are living, we went through COVID in 2020, right? And onwards. Since COVID-19, we've seen massive global shifts, economic, political, and even military. At the same time, we hear terms like the Great Reset, rising tensions with Iran, and a world that feels like it's changing fast. And all of us can agree to that. Wherever we are, we see a world that is in flux. The question is, are these isolated incidents or events, or are they part of a deeper global shift? That is what we are here to discuss this afternoon. What was COVID's real global impact? That is the first question we'd like to ask. How did COVID impact the world order or an emerging new world order? And this is what we are also going to discuss this afternoon. COVID didn't just affect health. It reshaped power. And that is what we have to understand. It wasn't just about a virus, but how did it transform us economically, politically, and even militarily, right? That is what we have to also ask. What is the Great Reset that we often hear without sounding, we don't want to sound conspiratorial, but we know that there is something that is brewing that we cannot touch and that we have to understand what's really going on. Now, the term of course, that's the Great Reset, comes from the World Economic Forum. Many of you heard about that, the WEF, the WEF, not the WEP, but the WEF as we call it, the World Economic Forum. And that is something they've been talking about, a global reset. In fact, there is a book that speaks about that. And the former head or chair of the World Economic Forum, he was the one who wrote that book, which I read some chapters of. Very, very boring, but it's something that we have to take seriously, that our world is not the same. Our world is re-emerging, and it's something that we have to take and to pay some attention to. Now, when global instability rises, power blocks start to shift, and that's where Iran becomes critical. My opinion is that COVID-19 was, when we had that health emergency with COVID, that was, I call it COVID 1.0. The war on Iran is COVID 2.0, because that is going to result in the total transformation of the economic infrastructure. We might see the collapse of the petrodollar as we know it. So it's something that we have to look closely at, and we might be transitioned into what we call a digital economy. So we have to make sure we're paying attention, and how is that going to affect you and I? The cost of oil, people are already suggesting that it is beyond the cost. It is increasing the cost of living, and the people are in flux. Now, is this a natural evolution of global power or something more deliberate? This is something that we have to look at. Are they doing this purposely, because sometimes we think that it's one country versus the next, and that might be so in some cases, but we must understand that there is also a global agenda that is at play. And sometimes, while there are forces and they might be divided, but we also have to look how these forces are also uniting uniting to form what we called a global government. Now, many people say that there won't be a global government. What we'll have is global governance. And I agree with that. I don't think that our world will ever be united where we are all thinking the same, we're doing the same. So they have to actually manage us from a center, whether it's from the United States or it's from the United Nations, wherever it will be. They are trying to formulate, as we can see, a global system of governance. Now, the COVID pandemic was a sort of bridge, was used as a system in which we saw where the entire world behaved the same. How could they make the entire world follow one narrative is something that is still baffling to me. So we can see already that there are systems in place that if they can create it from something that is going to scare the lifeblood out of us, as COVID did, then it means therefore that they will be able to accomplish their global system of governance. So that's what we have to understand. If we look back at COVID, we can see the blueprint. That's the expression I was looking for of what the world is going to be. And we've lived through it. We've seen what happened. We've seen that all the world, from Russia to China to the United States to Europe, everybody was following basically the same narrative. They might have used different medications, but the same narrative was actually adhered to. And that is what we have to understand. We cannot think that we're living now in normal times and these people are warring against each other. How is it that everybody, including Iran, China, Russia, the United States, Venezuela, all of us in the Caribbean and the entire world did the same thing? How is it that that happened? When we understand that the United States and China were primarily responsible for the pandemic and what happened. That is something that is for you to reflect on. I'm not sure I would like to influence what you think. Now, so we're looking at this very interesting topic, and good afternoon again to everyone. Over the past few years, the world has changed in ways that many people are still trying to fully understand. If it started first with COVID-19 as a global pandemic that didn't just impact public health, but it reshaped economies, governments, and everyday life. Even wars were reshaped out of COVID. Immediately after COVID, we saw where the United States, Russia, and the Ukraine were involved in a war, of course, with Israel. So we have entire industries were shut down during COVID, as we saw. Small businesses collapsed. So we saw where there was a consolidation of larger businesses, right? And that was something that was interesting. How could it that you have large corporations surviving and yet still the small businesses, they had to be closed down because they didn't want COVID to spread. Now, wasn't COVID spreading in these large corporations? Something that we have to ask ourselves. Meanwhile, large corporations grew even stronger, which means that they are consolidating their power. Governments took on emergency powers and societies became more digitized almost overnight. And notice I'm saying that I think that one of the agendas of this war on Iran is going to be the fact that they're going to tell us that the dollar, the petrodollar, has to go. And many of us are, of course, backing that. And we should back that the United States should decide now that it might be the end of her. President Jafar is saying every financial expert predicted a financial collapse in 2019, just before COVID-19. And you're correct. Conveniently appeared, Elon Musk was dumping his Bitcoin and created his Dogecoin. Absolute coincidence? And that is exactly what is happening. And this is what we're saying, that if you notice that before COVID-19, we were hearing of the fact that the economy could have collapsed, right? People were talking about that. And then suddenly we saw the COVID-19 came upon, they locked us down, and then they started to blame COVID for the collapse of the economy and for the collapse of small businesses. So they will always come up with something, whether it's a war or it's a medical emergency, to destroy the world, and then they will build from the ashes. Notice that COVID-19 resulted in the deaths of many hundreds and thousands of people. And people are telling me, oh, yes, and people in Iran, US soldiers or Chinese soldiers, whoever soldiers are dying, these people don't care. Right? These people don't care if they are building from that ashes to achieve the global plan that they want to. Yes, Musk, correct. And Jafar is saying again, not created, but Musk invested heavily in Dogecoin. Absolutely. And COVID-19 should have really sparked a more open and transparent discussion amongst us in terms of the consolidation of power among global elites, because we were the ones who were impacted. Notice that the global elites were not following the narrative as they were telling us to follow. They were outside, they were going to sports game. Even Fauci, right, who was the head of the CDC, and he was having all of these rules for us and we should wear a mask. He was seeing at football matches without any mask. Dr. Fauci, right, of the United States, who was the head of the CDC then. He's no longer. I think he's now at Georgetown University. So we have to look at these things and say, but how did this happen that these people who are so-called enemies, China and America are supposed to be enemies, and yet still they were involved in the creation of a pandemic, right, of a virus. And then afterwards, they were following the same rules, the same narrative, the same, how are we going to, improve, heal ourselves of this virus? So we have to come to grips now and see that enemies, are they just playing enemies, the games of enemies, while they are dividing us? President Jafar says they are looking to lock us down again. Absolutely. And notice that, Jafar, that in many of the wars that are being waged now, people are being locked down as we speak, right? Any major event that happens in this world, whether it's a medical event or it could be war, economic, shutdown, they are going to lock us down. Let us say, for example, that the US dollar should be destroyed tomorrow. They don't want any protest. Lots of us are going to lose our savings and our monies. They know that people will be going out and want to protest and whatever, and they will lock you down, that you can't go out. And that is what we have to understand. So right now, even protests, if you notice in the United States, even people are protesting against the war on Iran and other things that are happening, even the war on Venezuela, Cuba, whatever, they're being threatened. So we have to watch that very soon we are not going to be allowed to have mass protests. They are going to lock us down. They're looking to lock us down again because of fuel rationing due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. That's exactly what is happening. And you really wonder if some of these things are engineered or are they just coincidental? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Is the Strait of Hormuz and what is happening there something that is engineered to reassess the world and to reorientate the world into the world that they want the world to be, which is going to be the post, petrodollar era? I think they want a digital economy. I don't think they want a dollarized economy where the dollar is the king and they can't really track us and see what we're doing. And they can't control us in the way in which they control us, or they could control us under a digitized economy. Right? Make sure that you're liking the video and also you're sharing the live so that people can join this. It's a very important discussion, and these are the discussions that we ought to have in the Caribbean at the moment. There is no way at this moment that we are going to be saved but by ourselves. As Marcus Garvey says, we are the ones who have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. China is not going to do that. Iran is not going to do that. The United States is not going to do that. We ourselves have to be, right, the premier actors of emancipating ourselves from economic and mental slavery and all other forms of slavery that we are under right now in the Caribbean. Okay, I think that we're watching these things as a sports match, and we think that one is going to win and the other is going to lose. It doesn't work like that. And I hope that you're growing up and you're understanding. In the COVID agenda, we saw where, we lost. They didn't lose. In fact, they got lots of money. Okay, and if we were more sensible, we would have told them no. to everything that they access, and they would not have been able to have generated all that money that they generated. So yeah, that is some of the things that we have to look at. We've got to think about. Let me hear your thoughts. Please let me hear your thoughts and what you're thinking in terms of the topic, and we will discuss as we go along. So in the middle of this, we see this great reset. Okay, there's a great reset that is happening right now before us, and it's going to come upon us unawares. Many of us are going to be surprised that we wake up one morning and we can't go to the bank, or if we go to the bank, everything is gone, or you might not have the same amount of money that you thought you had. All right, if you talk to people, for example, that were part of the European Union, many of them, when the European Union came into existence, lost hundreds of thousands of their currency. Do you know that? So those who had the Italian currency, they lost hundreds of thousands of their local currency. Those who had the pesetas in Spain, they lost thousands of their pesetas because of the merger, the consolidation of this, what we call European Union. Are we heading in that direction? And that this is something that we have to understand. You know, this morning I was watching briefly a documentary reminding us of what took place in England when the Windrush generation, and those of you who are Caribbean, you understand the Windrush generation. The Windrush generation were the people who went to England from the Caribbean after World War II to help in the rebuilding process of England. Now, these people went there and they thought that they were contributing to the rebuilding of what they considered to have been their motherland, England, right? That's what they were brainwashed to think. And when they went there, they understood that they were not welcomed in England as people from the Caribbean. Now, they stayed amidst all of the racial divisions and the hostilities. They remained in England. But fast forward to 2018, England wanted to send them back home and to strip them rather of their British nationality. Right? Remember that? So when we look at what is happening in the United States now with the denationalization and even sending back people who are citizens of the United States back to their home country or just sending them to a third country, we must understand that this happened in Great Britain in 2018. You know, I forgot that it did happen, and we lived that experience. So many things are happening in the world now that if we don't write them down, we are not going to be able to connect the dots because they're happening so rapidly that we forget that these things happen. So fast forward to 2025, 26, when we're hearing about Trump trying to, to strip people of their nationality and their citizenship. And that happened in Great Britain in 2018 with the Windrush generation. Do you see how these guys work together? And if we're not able to connect the dots, then we would just say that these things are just happening in isolation. But they're not happening in isolation, and that is why you and I are here to connect the dots. Now, this isn't conspiracy as people think. People think that the Great Reset is a conspiracy term. It's a real concept promoted by institutions like the World Economic Forum. It talks about rethinking capitalism, restructuring economies, and building a more sustainable and inclusive global system after COVID. So that is what they're about. They want to rebuild the system as it is. You think that America is going to lose. Yes, American citizens are going to lose. But the global elites, they're the ones who are re-engineering society. Order ab chaos, that's what they call it, order out of chaos. So some people are telling, oh, Trump is a president of chaos. The global elites are creating engineered chaos so that they can rebuild the society in the image that, or after the image that they desire. So a lot of the wars that we are seeing now waging in the world are done deliberately to re-image the world, to rebuild the world after their image and likeness. Hope you're understanding that. But here's where the debate begins. Some see it as necessary reform in a broken system, right? That is what, and some of them, we must say that not all of them are evil, because some of them do not understand the agenda. Let me just say this very carefully. Some of our leaders do not understand the agenda. Do you know that? Not because they're in government and you think they're rubbing shoulders with people of, high status that they understand. Okay, many of them don't understand, and they have good intentions. Some of them really have good intentions. They understand that this world is what you call, uneven, and we need justice. It's unequal, and they're trying to see in their way, from their naivete, they're thinking that they can work with others to sort of refashion a world, right? To rebuild a more just and equitable world. But they're going to see that they are going to be deceived. So that is where you have to understand. Don't believe all your leaders, and we can't put them all into one box. Some of them are decent, law-abiding men and women. Others see it as an opportunity for elites to consolidate power during a moment of global crisis. And I believe that. I believe that the global elites are now consolidating power, and they're waiting on the right moment, like COVID happened, when they are now going to say, enough is enough, everybody's a slave under our system. And while that conversation is unfolding, we're also seeing rising geopolitical tension, right? We have no time to think. Have you realized that since COVID, we have just not had the time to think? We're just being bombarded by one war after the other. So many things are coming at us that we don't know really what to believe. It's just too many things happening. And sometimes even I, as much as I present the news to you, I have to block out some of what I'm seeing because I don't want to go crazy. Right? This is the sort of world that we're living in. We have to just find some time to say, I'm not going to read anything. I'm not going to listen to what they're saying. It sits at the center of global energy roots, regional conflicts, and a growing divide between world powers. And they're having that division because they want power. They are trying to see who is going to be the most powerful in this new world order. Not because they want to free you, not because Iran desires that you be free. Now, the Iranians, when they stand up, we can say we can stand in solidarity with them, but not necessarily with their leaders. Because all of them some of them, I should say, are part of the agenda. Any escalation there doesn't stay local, it ripples across the entire global system. And I'm not sure if Caribbean people understand that whatever happens in Iran, whatever happens in Cuba, whatever happens in Venezuela, whatever happens in Spain, it's going to send ripple effects across the region. And sometimes I find us to be too narrow and superficial in the way how we are looking at things. So when you step back and look at all of this together, a question starts to emerge. Are these just separate events happening at the same time? Could they just be separate events, as some of us like to think? Oh, the war on Iran, the war in Venezuela, the Cuba, all of these things, are they just happening separately? Or is there something that we need to connect the dots? Are we connecting the dots and saying that there is a bigger picture here and we have to see what it is? Or are we witnessing a deeper shift in how global power is being structured? Is the world naturally evolving into a new order? And from the 1990s, George W. Bush, right, the senior, had said that he was building a new world order. The United States was from that time, and all the other global elites were busy building a new world order. And I think that his son, after 9/11, alluded to that. And he said that you are either with us or you are against us, which means that there is no middle ground. In the building of this new world order, there is no middle ground. It's either you are going to be with them on the agenda or they are going to find ways to get rid of you and I. Or is that transition being shaped intentionally by those with influence? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Are these things just happening coincidentally? Are we just seeing the war in Iran? Are we just witnessing the war on Venezuela, as we just saw with the president being kidnapped? Okay, are these things just happening because Trump is a crazy man and he wants to get these people? I think we have to reason deeper than that. I think we have to look at the big picture and look at where they are taking. What is the end result? What is the end game? Okay, so this afternoon, we're not jumping to conclusions. We're asking questions. We're, connecting the dots. That is what we do on this channel. And we're looking at what's actually happening beyond headlines, beyond narratives. Because whether you believe this is a coincidence or not, okay, one thing is clear. The world we're living in today is not the same one we had just a few years ago. Let's talk about it. All right. And that is what we have to. Now, let's begin with the first question. And I want you to participate in our conversation this afternoon. Do you think COVID changed the balance of power globally? Let's ask the first question. Do you think COVID changed the balance of power globally? Let's look at some of the comments here. Yes, and Iran will give passage if you pay in Chinese yuan, not US or EU currency. Yes. And then we have here the global elites are above nationalities, right? They are not. You know, when you think that Elon Musk and these people, the guy from software, Microsoft, what's his name, Bill Gates, and these people, if you think that they're Americans and they're South Africans or whomever they are, they're not necessarily so. And they might in sometimes, try to, show you that they're Americans or whatever nationality they belong to, but that is not their sum total. That's not the essence of their identity. Their identity is linked with power, and power transcends national boundaries. That's what we have to understand. Okay, so when we're thinking that it's the US versus this, we have to be careful. Who is fighting against whom? Now, we've been in World War III since 2014. Yeah, and I want to think World War, there's a World War in the COVID was a World War II, and that I think was on a greater scale. When we think of the numbers of businesses, numbers of people who died, I think that COVID-19 was a terrible world war. The entire world was in that battle. Okay, entire world. Okay, so if we want to call that, people think this is World War III in Iran. Okay, but World War III was during the COVID pandemic also, where we voluntarily gave up our rights. So we're saying started from the Donbass, right? Ukraine conflict. Yeah, that was also another one. And I think that it started with COVID and it, and culminated with that Donbass, Ukraine-Russian war. The rich get exponentially richer during COVID. That's exactly because they closed down all these, these, what do you call it now? Medium-sized businesses. All these, small to medium-sized businesses were virtually dead because they were locked down. And how can you earn money when you're locked down? My question was during COVID, how is it that these large corporations were able to stay open while these other people had to close down? And do we understand just one day lockdown is serious to the global economy? I don't know how they were able to do so many days and weeks and months. I really don't know without having seriously. Of course, they did affect the economy. It did affect the economy, but I thought we were going to crash afterwards because how can a global economy that was already indebted, how did it withstand all these months of lockdown? I don't know. Now, Philip Yardy is saying this is that of the New World. Bush alluded to that, right? The New World Order came on the back of the collapse of the Soviet Union, correct? Yeah, that was when he said it. And in fact, as you said that, Philly, there was a guy called Chalmers Johnson of the United States, and he was a Cold War warrior. He believed that the United States was waging a war against the Soviet Union to effectuate freedom and democracy in the world. But when he saw that after the Soviet Union fell and the United States continued with its machinery, its war machinery, then Chalmers Johnson said that he knew that something was wrong, and that the whole matter of the Cold War to end dictatorship and communism and all that nonsense that they said they were going to do, that was something that was phony, because the United States started to build aggressively its military apparatus post the fall of the Soviet Union. So you're correct, and this is what we're saying, that they tell us one narrative, but behind the scenes they are doing another thing, because war is a profit, is a racket, as Smedley Butler said. We need to remember that statement, that war is a racket. Remember that they wanted Smedley Butler to have killed FDR, right? His agenda, the corporate elites, people don't know that people in the United States, Wall Street guys wanted him, Smedley Butler, a former decorated American soldier, Marine Corps, whatever that you call them, to have killed the president because he was, in implementing the New Deal. And that to the global elites in America and worldwide was too progressive because he wanted to help some poor Americans and by extension the world, right? And he told them no. And then he wrote the book, War is a Racket, in which he disclosed that the entire system is built on warfare, and that is how they make their profits. That is how, whether it is Wall Street or it's Down Street or whatever street you live on in the world, that is how people make profit. In the Western world, people live through violence. Slavery was also a violent system, and that's why it had to go down violently. This system will also, if it goes down, will have to go down through what? Violence. And it's so sad because that is how the system was built on, violence. And for it to be destroyed, it unfortunately, it has to go down violently, not through reforms. It's sad, isn't it? Now, there is barely a middle class, only what we have are aristocracy and peasants, right? In most countries, that's what we have. And we're getting there every day. We're seeing the collapse, and we're seeing where there is a stark divide between the rich and between the poor, right? And that is what we're seeing in today's world. And what is interesting now, what do you think about the new social media aristocracy? Because they're become now a part. There are some people who are on social media and they're getting lots of money, and and coming from the working class. What do you think about them and what they are going to do maybe in the future? You remember that Stephen Knight is saying, you remember the meeting Pompeo had with the Caribbean leaders during COVID? Yes, I remember that. And he also he divided the Caribbean too, because at one point he had the DR and he had Haiti, had Jamaica, and some other countries that he invited. They invited to see Trump, and also he came to the Caribbean and he divided the entire region into American sphere. So we have seen that not only with Mrs. Kamala Persson-Bissessar, but other prime ministers of the Caribbean region, including Jamaica and the DR, have always made themselves accessible. Even Guyana from then was also captured. Stephen Knight is saying, yeah, unfortunately, if you want peace for your rights, is going to be violent because the system is violent. And the people that control the world order don't want peace, right? That's what we have to understand. The people who control the world order that we currently live in are not desirous of having peace, right? They want war because war is a profit-making machinery. And the more weapons that they can sell, it's the more they become billionaires, if not trillionaires very soon. Right? So when we look at what is happening in Iran, they don't want the war to stop because who's going to buy their arms, their weapons, right? They make more money. They don't care if there are losses of people's lives, right? They don't care, and human suffering. And that there are some dark forces in this world that if they should be unmasked, I think we would, I don't think we'd be able to stand and look at them, right? They're so demonic. Right, some of these people that you see, and in the bank, the people who are the bankers rather, they are the ones also behind the wars. So these are things that we must understand. We cannot look now at the world as a place where the battle that is going to be fought is something that is going to be a world war, and people go and stand up and they shoot some arms and the world goes back to being a normal place. This is not the times we are living at the moment. And now they have all of this tracking and the technologies and the weapons that are actually unthinkable, right? So we need to understand, we need to take a grip on life. Are we willing to lose our lives because of what lies ahead? Or are we willing to stand up for principles? During the pandemic, many of us did not. We sided with I'm going to do that because, I have to do it and move on. And we see that moving on was not so. right? That we life just did not move on. In fact, it got worse, all because we were so afraid of what they could have done to us or what the virus could have done to us that we folded our arms or wings and we accepted and we were beaten down day by day. And even now, we find that they are continuing to abuse us in the most egregious way. Now we have Thassi saying Malachi 4 verse 1 tells you how the world order will end. Absolutely. It's going to end violently. It tells us, yes, what will happen to this system. It will be burned with fire. Absolutely. This is not going. And then also, when you look at the French Revolution, was the French Revolution a nice revolution? No. It was one of the most vicious revolutions that this world has ever experienced. All because of slavery. All because of what took place in Saint-Domingue. And then the Haitian Revolution followed thereafter, not very later, but the French Revolution sparked the Haitian Revolution, and that too was violent. The emancipation of Jamaica and the other parts of the Caribbean, Trinidad, wherever you are, Barbados, all of these, Guyana, all of these, freedom, movements were violent. They just had to be violent. Our people didn't want to be violent. The slaves didn't want to be violent. They just wanted their freedom. But because the system was violent, the system would not have it, so they had to use violence against their so-called slave masters. Right? So we too are going to have that system, and it is going to be through violence. I don't know if we have that fortitude to stand up to a system that is so violent. And it's very difficult for you to see that because we see violence mostly through thuggish people, right? Those who are walking on the streets and they look like hip-hop stars and whatever, the rappers, the dancehall, whatever. But these are not necessarily the violent people. The violent people are the ones you have in the banks, right? And you have sometimes in some high positions in the church, right? And you have in places that you think, are civilized, and people are nice and they speak nice and they dress nice, right? These are some of the most violent people that we have in the world. And that is what we have to look at and we have to understand. We have Faith saying, open Isaiah 63 verse 1. It says that Christ's garment will be filled with blood. Yeah. It's going to be a bloody war. It's going to be a bloody combat. But I think what is going to happen if it is not going to be as violent as the Haitian and the French Revolution is that we're controlled. In our generation, I think we are more controlled than any generation in the history of humanity. And that is where they might be able to prevent a bloody warfare, because many of us don't even perceive the system that is rotten to its core. We see a system that, we're surviving now, so we think that all is well, right? When all is not well. So I think that is how they are going to be able to, prevent, avert any bloody war yet for now. Postpone it. Maybe it might not be as bloody as the French Revolution because at least the slaves knew that they were slaves, right? Our foreparents, our ancestors knew that they were slaves and they had to fight for their liberty, and they knew who the enemies were. To a large extent, we don't know who the enemies are. Do we? We just think that the enemy might be the gangster in Kingston, right? He's the enemy. As Andrew Hollis is saying that he's going after the gang members, right? But who is the gang member? Now, Phil is saying, yes, the military-industrial complex and big banks like J.P. Morgan, who are the financiers. Disasters become real profitable for them, and it is. And they are behind it. They are behind the funding of these disasters. We call them man-made disasters. The wars, World War I, World War II, the Cold War. The Civil War in the United States could have been, if they just decided that, look here, the slaves, you have to end slavery. They knew what they were supposed to do, but they were holding on to power and money and wealth that they just could not see themselves doing it. Okay? We are trapped now in debt, and that is what is going to bring us back on the plantation, debt. and they've trapped us in that debt. We see it as a way, that's the only way we can become wealthy, by borrowing people's money and, driving nice cars and living in big houses. So we are trapped in this economic system that we do not understand that we are enslaved. At least when they had the shackles, right? The slaves had the shackles, they realized that they were enslaved. We don't. We have economic shackles on, we have political shackles on, and we don't realize that we are likewise enslaved. Now, Stephen says the biggest thugs are the ones wearing clergy outfits and suits. Absolutely. It is sad that they are the ones who look as if they are divine and people follow them. Right? I was talking to an Italian guy the other day, and he was telling me about, confessing his sins to the priest. He's a Catholic. And I'm like, why would you want to confess your sins to a priest? The priest is just as sinful as you are. So why would you confess? Why would you open up your hearts, right? The recesses of your heart to a human. And for him, because he's from Italy, he finds it very odd that I would make a comment like that, because that is so part of his culture and people who have grown up Catholics. And, maybe in other religions too, people are going to tell them what they did. And no, that is not, I'm not going to tell any human, confess my sins to any human. The shackles are on the minds of the people, right? And that is why Marcus Garvey was telling us that we have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. Why is it that, years ago, people like the Eric Williams of Trinidad and other people, the guy from Guyana, what's his name again? The one who wrote the Underdevelopment of Africa, in the Underdevelopment of Africa, Rodney. Why are these people? These people were superstars back in the 60s and the 70s and 80s, 90s, right? And now our superstars are our athletes, our sports athletes, our musicians, rappers, dancehall, singers. These are now our heroes. They are now the celebrities, right? But we were forced back then under Eric Williams in Trinidad to analyze how economically we were enslaved, right? Through economics of the Western societies, and through Rodney, we learned about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. And maybe if we were, more astute, we would write a book and say how Europe underdeveloped. I think Eric Williams mentioned that, though, how Europe underdeveloped the Caribbean, right? Because he wrote the book Slavery and what is it again? Was it Slavery and Capitalism, right? That Eric Williams wrote. So he showed us how the British used, slavery to have amassed the wealth that they generated there in Britain, built it on the backs of the Caribbean. Barbados and Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, all of those places, okay, were used to build up England while they sucked the lifeblood out of the Caribbean, right? But now we don't find ourselves talking about these things anymore. In fact, we're now celebrating the IMF and celebrating things that I'm sure that Eric Williams and these people would have really cried. They're crying in their graves that we now are accepting systems, economic systems that they were speaking out against whilst they were alive. What has happened to us? I don't know. Something happened, but again, as I'm saying, our role models are now different. They're now the rappers and the dancehall, the soca people. And I'm not saying now that these people don't have their spheres, don't get me wrong. And people can have their different role models. But I think we place too much emphasis on these people when we should now be looking at people with brains to help us understand how we are going to liberate ourselves from this very, geopolitical wranglings that we find ourselves and the challenges that bedevil us at this current moment. Now, for those of you who are from Trinidad, let me see in the chat, because what is happening now with the nurses? I'm reading this very disturbing news. Some people are telling me that Mrs. Person Bissessar is about to import Trinidad nurses from India. Is that true? And are they going to get rid of the nurses, the local nurses? Marie Antoinette is saying, yeah, one of the reasons that we no longer hold the intellectuals as celebrities is that we now try to escape from our economic problems with entertainment focuses. Correct. We have to some extent given up? I think so. But again, we have to come to grips, yes, that these social and economic, systems are depressing. As I'm telling you, sometimes I get up in the morning and I refuse to read the papers. I don't want, I just don't want to read it. And sometimes even presenting these things to you, I get depressed. It's not because I'm here to say this is happening and I'm happy that it's happening. I just try to be as energetic as I'm presenting the news, but it's not because when you present them and you realize what is happening, it really affects you. Sometimes I don't want to get up and even look at the screen. I just don't want to even look at any paper because it's depressing. But at the end of the day, we have to come to grips with the realities. It's the reality. Slavery was depressing. Right? And I'm sure the world that Eric Williams and Walter Rodney lived in was also depressing. But they understood that they had to do what is best to inform us and to empower us. Philly Yardy is saying, you are talking about the shadow government, the unelected cabal, aka the deep state, who run things behind the scene to get an obedient, useful idiot like Trump made their day. But all of the presidents that they've had so far are their robots, right? They are their minions. Whether it is Kamala Harris or it is Joseph Biden or it is Obama, they are all the same. Trump is, as we're saying, more palpably, a crazy person. But I think that when you look at what, the Obama did, we can't say Kamala was behind Biden, so she has some blame, some knocks to get to. Right, but the fact is, I don't think that the war on Iran would have been, would not have been launched had it been under Kamala Harris. I think that she would have taken a similar route. I think that the Iranian war has been in the works for many years. So I think all of these presidents are presidents that have to be yes men and yes, women for those of us who are in the Caribbean, because America has not yet had a female president, right? But for those of us who are in the Caribbean or other parts of the world, they all have to be yes men and yes women. Whether it is Mrs. Kamala, person Bissessar, or it is Andrew Holness of Jamaica, they are all the same. They are not able to stand up for principled actions, right? They just do what they're told to do. And oftentimes they are paid because of that, right? Because somebody pays them to do the job that they want them to achieve. So it is what it is. Yeah, so we were talking about Trinidad. For those of you who are from Trinidad, the situation now with the nurses, what is happening there? Are there now, is it now improved? Are we seeing where the nurses have gone back to their jobs? The North Central Regional Health Authority, that's the NCRHA in Trinidad and Tobago, is recruiting over 100 midwives from India to address chronic understaffing. And you really wonder, now that we're having all these chronic understaffing, and that's the time that we're sending back the Cuban medical staff. Isn't that ironic? But at the same time that, and I'm sure that the nurses were coming from India, because we know that many of these nurses, they probably want some, I'm not saying that they're going to be coming on exploitative, abusive labor laws or labor contracts, but it's really ironic, ladies and gentlemen, that right now, when the Caribbean is in serious, not only Trinidad and Tobago, by the way, Jamaica is too, right? We might not be in the news about our medical system, but Jamaica is in a serious crisis in terms of its medical system, its medical healthcare system. But right now, when we need these Cuban nurses and doctors, that's the time that we are sending them back to their country. By the way, I found another irony. How is it I've not heard where they're sending back the Cuban teachers, only the Cuban doctors and nurses? What is about that? That's strange, right? Why are they emphasizing only the Cuban doctors and nurses, medical staff, but they are not talking about teachers? Because we have Cuban teachers. Do you have Cuban teachers in Trinidad and Tobago also? I know they have Cuban teachers in Jamaica, Spanish and science teachers. Faisy is saying we also need to examine the quality of graduates coming out of our universities, as there appears to be a decline in strong scholarly development. Yes, because again, we're moving from that into just, being titled and people getting a job and people just acting like celebrities. It's a celebrity-driven academia also that we have. It's not what the serious quality work that they used to produce in the days of, Eric Williams. When you look at the standard of brilliance that Eric Williams had, the Trinidadian professor, is we're not producing people like that anymore. He was a person of his class, and the CLR James and these people, they were brilliant people. Why are we not producing these quality people anymore? And I don't think it's because we lack the talent, as you're saying, Faisy. We don't lack the talent. I think if we demand the standards, but even the UE now, because UE wants money, it is now lowering its standards, right, to ensure that people get there. And once you can pay, like the United States, once you can pay to get in, then you graduate. Right, so the standards have to be lowered, and I'm not suggesting here that they should behave like a plantation, because to some extent our education system is also a plantation, reflects the plantocracy. But we have to have some standards in terms of how our students graduate and what are they able to do after graduating. And it is so sad when I listen to sometimes, I listen sometimes to professors from Jamaica who are in the economics department. I really wonder what they've studied, and they're professors of economics. I think that you'd hear better, content coming out of the mouths of people like Eric Williams, and the CLR James and all the great economists and, historians that we have produced in the Caribbean. I think something is definitely wrong. Something is definitely wrong. I think we are adapting to a system that is only based on marketing, right? So whatever is okay, people are demanding nurses, then nursing should be the career that people go into. People are demanding pharmacists, so pharmacy should be the only career that people go into. People are demanding teachers, so that is what you should be. People don't go into education anymore because they want to be empowered. Okay, you say, oh, I'm studying Spanish. What are you going to do with that? And to be frank, they're right, because what are you going to do with it? Nobody wants you. Right? If you're not in that marketing pool, they don't want your services, right? If you're a thinker, they don't want you to. You have to be somebody who is willing to, to go with the status quo. And that is the problem we're having with our education system at the moment. It's built on, please share the live, and also please like it. With Kamala, the Democrats are hawkish towards Russia, so they would probably have been in a world war with Russia. The Ukraine situation started under Obama to 2014, correct? 2022, like most of us think, correct? You're correct. You're correct that I was listening to another documentary, Philly Yardi, and they did say, and they're correct, say that the Democrats represent the neoliberal version of the empire, while the Republicans represent the what do you call it now, the neocons, right? The neocons. So it's still an empire. One represents the neocons, right? So if you're on the right, then you represent that version, the neocon version of the U.S. empire, while if you represent the Democratic, party, then you are the neoliberal. Both are the same, right? So one might be more military, maybe what I see, the Democrats are military also, but the neocons might be more so. They might be aggressive militarily. But when it comes on to economics too, which is what is going to enslave us, the Democrats are very aggressive. And they believe in the World Bank and the IMF, these sort of neoliberal institutions. And they impose these austere, policies upon countries. So which do you prefer? Do you prefer the neoliberal version or the neocon version of the U.S. empire? That is what we have to ask. And many of us in the Caribbean prefer the neoliberal. For some reason, I don't know. We prefer the Democrats, even though they are damaging, wrecking, or have damaged, wrecked our economies, from the likes of the Bill Clintons. Look at what they did to Haiti, and the banana and the rice, the rice industry particularly. That was very, very much an important staple in their economy, and they lived to see the day when the United States was importing rotten rice to Haiti. Do you know that? It was literally, and Haiti had one of the best rice in the Caribbean, I understand, when they had their rice industry going. Okay, and they lived to see the day when the United States wrecked that industry and then was importing rotten rice to Haiti. Right? Can you imagine? So this is a sort of world we're living, that even Haiti which was the freedom, the standard bearer for freedom in the region, that we're living to see the day where they're not in charge of things. They are not in charge, or the people, I should say, are not in charge of what is happening in Haiti. Neither are we in the other English-speaking and other parts of the Caribbean. We're not in charge of what is happening there or here. Okay? So when are we going to wake up to see that these wars are not just wars that are being, waged on Iran or Cuba or wherever they are, but these wars are all also being waged on us. We are the enemies. And we are the ones that they want to get rid of because we are costing them too much. Right? Oh, you want more money because you think you're a great doctor. You think you're a great nurse. So you want more money? Then I can go and import nurses from India or from wherever I want to import nurses. I don't need your service. And that's exactly what they're doing to us. And very soon we are going to be under the universal income. Have you heard about that? Universal income, where we'll all be getting the same salaries. Right? Because we're too big chest, right? We're too haughty, we're too arrogant, where you want to live in big house and you want to drive nice cars and you want to send your children to the best of schools. They don't think you should be doing that. Only the elites should. The common man shouldn't do that. And that is the world that they are actually pushing us into at the moment. Okay? So that is how we are, and that is where we are in this system of a global crisis. There was an article written here, The Great Reset, How the Iranian-Led Axis of Resistance is Defeating U.S., Israel, and Redrawing the Geopolitical Multipolar World Order. Now, many people think that there is a multipolar world. I don't think it is, but maybe people think that. I'm not going to argue over that. That is something we don't have to argue about. The geopolitical architecture of West Asia, long defined by the implosion of U.S. hegemony established after the Cold War, is undergoing a violent, did you hear that? Is undergoing a violent and decisive transformation. Didn't I tell you that it was violent? What we are witnessing is not merely a regional war, but the final war of liberation of West Asia, the global South, and the world. For decades, the United States utilized a network of bases and the power of the petrodollar to dictate terms to sovereign nations. Today, that structure is crumbling under the weight of a coordinated multi-front campaign led by Iran and the Axis of Resistance. As the war crosses its first month, the strategic landscape has shifted so fundamentally that even the most seasoned analysts in Washington are struggling to keep pace. From the total blockade of the Strait of Hormuz to the retreat of the U.S. Navy's carrier strike groups, the unipolar moment has officially expired. Iran has not only anticipated this confrontation, but has successfully withstood the massive firepower of the U.S.-Israel combined, achieving its primary strategic targets within the first 30 days. Now, do you think Iran is actually doing a good job in terms of freeing us? Do you think that Iran stands today, right now as we speak, as the standard bearers of liberty for the entire world? Do you think Iran is going to win in the final analysis? What do you think? And please share your viewpoints. We don't always have to agree with our viewpoints, but let's express ourselves, because that is how we learn here. You don't have to agree with me, neither do I have to agree with you, right? We're here to see if we can mull ideas and to see what makes sense, what are plausible. Do you think Iran is going to win ultimately this war against the United States? Let me hear from you, and why. If you think they're going to win, please let me know why you think they will end up winning the war. Because as the article was saying, that the global South is tired of the United States, just imposing upon us this petrodollar, image and destroying our local economies, correct? Because remember now, the petrodollar means that the United States gets a free lunch. That's what it means. So we have to pay all our debt in US dollars. We have to buy our oil in US dollars. We have to do all major transactions in US dollars, which means therefore that we are the ones funding the war. Do you know that? The Jamaica, All of these countries, who are, particularly those who are in IMF agreements, are funding wars around the world, because that's how the United States maintains its war. And that is why it doesn't want you to get yourself out, to extricate. This is like a free lunch for the United States, and they can go to your economy and tell you exactly what to do, what not to do, right? And that is how they control us economically. So do you think Iran is going to be the standard bearer, the one who is going to be our liberators, to liberate the third world, to send a clear message to Washington that enough is enough and we want to be economically free? Now, where is Africa in this story? Where is the Caribbean in this story? Why is it that we're not hearing much from Africa in terms of, apart from, Burkina Faso? Yeah, our destinies are tied to the US dollar at our detriment. Yes, sir. But what are we doing? We tend to, one of the things I don't like about Black studies, and I'm Black, don't get me wrong, I'm Black and love to be Black, but we are very vociferous, right, when things are calm. And we talk about Africa and what Africa means to us and all of that. When things get very hostile and we need somebody like Marcus Garvey, like a Sailor James, right, to stand up for our rights, everybody's quiet, right? Nobody's talking, right? Where are the people from academia to say where is Africa heading to, and where is our voice in all of this struggle for freedom? Philly's saying Iran cannot do by themselves correctly. Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying, suggesting here, Philly. However, if they get enough assistance from China, Russia, and others, why are we so much obsessed with China and Russia, and what is Africa doing? Because these people are going to do for their people. And that is what Marcus Garvey was saying all along. These people, even though you might get some crumbs and we might feel a sense of pride that they could have stood up to a mighty empire, it doesn't do anything for our people unless it mobilizes us to move in a similar path, on a similar path. But for the most part, I find African people, maybe including myself, to be talkative, but we are not actors, right? So whatever China is doing, and maybe she's doing something, but it's not going to be for our help, right? It's going to be for the help of Chinese people, and the Russia likewise. And that is why Marcus Garvey said Africa for what? For Africans. Because he was not thinking that, okay, Europe cannot go there or Europeans cannot go to Africa. He's saying that Africans are going to act in the interest of Africans. The Chinese people act in the interest of Chinese people. And that is what we have to understand. And our people are not understanding that. So we would rather sit on the side, cheering Africa, cheering Russia. What are we doing? Are we holding Africa to account? Is Africa on the side of the West? Or are the leaders in Africa siding with Trump and the Western elites of the world? Or are they backing what China and Russia are doing? Well, apart from what Burkina Faso's president is doing, what's his name again? Traoré, Ibrahim Traoré. Apart from the fact that he's standing up, right, to Western elites and to the Western elite structures, what is Africa doing? Nigeria, right, the largest Black country, if you will, what are they doing? Okay, Ghana, what is Ghana doing? Ethiopia, what is Ethiopia doing? And these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves. We cannot just sit back and think that, Russia and China will save us. That is not going to happen anytime soon. And people are just like that. We tend to look out for our own people and not for the interests of others. Now, do you see it as a positive change or something that we should be cautious about? Do you see the reset that we're talking about? Do you think it's a positive change? Do you think that what you're seeing in Iran is a positive change or something that we should be cautious about? Should we be cautious about what is happening in Iran? Or should we think that it's Positive. Anything that will come out of it is only positive. What do you think? Let me go to another question because I want our participation. Should global institutions have this much influence over economic direction? Do you think that global institutions like the IMF and the World Bank should have a lot of influence over our economic direction? And why not if they should? Any response? Because these are the conversations that we have to have now. Because if economically, if we're defeated, it's over, right? And I want to think it's over. But I just want to know that some of us understand what is happening. So maybe it's not over. But if we don't understand the importance of economics to our liberties, then we are going to be we're in a serious crisis. And I'm seeing too many of us cheering for the IMF and what the IMF is doing in the World Bank and other institutions, other multilateral institutions, when they do not mean us well. They don't mean us well. Yeah, so we have President is saying, Jafar is saying, no, I see IMF and World Bank as financial slavers. They are financial enslavers, absolutely. They are. We have borrowed too much money from them to be free. And if we don't free ourselves from the IMF and the World Bank, there's no way that no matter what is done in Iran or what is achieved in Cuba or what's achieved anywhere in Venezuela or wherever it is achieved, we are going to still be enslaved. We are going to still be enslaved here in the Caribbean. And this is something that we don't understand. I think our understanding of freedom means a war, and the war in Iran is won, then we're free. It doesn't work like that. Slavery was also, and it was a physical system in terms of the shackles, that people in shackles, but it was also it was mainly an economic system, an economic model. The plantocracy was an economic model. And that's why it had to go down. It had to go down violently. Without it going down, things would not have changed. The slaves would not have been freed. Okay? So that is what we have to understand. We need to reassess where we stand, and that economics is at the the wars are economics, or wars of economics anyway. So we must decide what side we are choosing in terms of the economics. Okay? Now, we could ask another question. Do you think tensions with Iran could trigger a wider global conflict? Do you think that tensions with Iran could trigger a wider global conflict? Do you think so? Do you think that China, Russia might come in and decide to take sides and, engage us into, okay, let me get here. We have here that Philly is saying Nigeria is irrelevant. They have a president that is US, UK, and France, first. Very disappointed by Nigeria being the most black country, correct. And it needs independent, it needs to be independent and strong. But do you think that other countries in Africa are different from Nigeria? Because I don't think we in the Caribbean here are different from what is happening in Nigeria. So I think that all of us do. We see what happened in Trinidad. We see what happened in Guyana, right? So I don't think we are different, and we are predominantly black too, based on what we say black is. The Caribbean is predominantly black. So the fact is that we are not different, and we can see that the leaders in Africa are also controlled. And that is why I'm saying I'm having a problem with people who study black history and whatever. Well, not a problem with people who study black history, a problem with what we do with the knowledge. That's what I should say. All right? It's not that nothing is wrong with studying black history, it's what we do with the knowledge. That I don't know if that knowledge is helping to empower us. I think it's more people wearing, that they know all of this stuff in their head. And they tell you about the history of Nigeria and Ethiopia, and they sound very good. Yeah, some of them really. You'd sit for them the whole day and listen to them talk about Africa and what Africa was, and But what does it matter what Africa was if we don't know what Africa is today? Right? We have to be very careful of that, right? President Jafar is saying that African countries are trying their best to pay off their IMF loans, right, to the chagrin of USA and the EU. You're correct. But the thing about it, Jafar, they don't want us to pay it off, right? As soon as we pay off it, then they come up with something else and we go right back. I remember in Jamaica, for example, in Jafar, in 1995, Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister P.J. Patterson bidded the IMF goodbye. And then back in 2008, again, we were right there under their wings. So we might temporarily pay off, at one point, and then something happens. Look at Jamaica again, too. Jamaica was just about to pay off its loans and go right down to 60% of GDP. Boom. And then Hurricane Melissa came, and they're right back in the throes of the IMF. So we have to chart a different path. We have to chart a different path to the IMF because it's not helping to free us. Yes, the AFC alliance is trying to rid themselves of the World Bank and the IMF. Well, hopefully that will be the case because the United States is also warring against those of us who make alternative or alternate decisions in terms of our economic wherewithal. France will eventually launch a war on AFS with the help of Nigeria, Algeria, Benin, and Ivory Coast. And as I'm saying that, blackness does not mean anything right now because it seems to me that people are just on the West or on you're on another side. You're either with the US or you're against the United States. And if you are against the United States, then you are going to feel the ire of the United States. This is not a war of ethnicity. It's a war of military might. And it will be some amount of ethnicity will be involved and racism and whatever, but it's not going to be the central, what should I say now, the central cause of the war that we find in our world at the moment. And I think we have to grow up in terms of that perspective. I know we're passionate about our Black image and Caribbean and Africa and all of that stuff, but how do we cloud our eyes, blind our eyes to see that there are other things at issue, some very, very dark things and bigger than any country and nationality we can't just put it into one box and say this is a war against America versus Iran. It is to superficial level, it is, but it's deeper than just a war between the United States and Iran. Yes, the ECOWAS. Yes, I've read about the ECOWAS too. Yes. Now, what can we do, people? What is it that the African countries can do? Yeah, Pan-Africanism is mostly a Caribbean concept out of necessity. African nations are terribly tribalistic, correct? Nations, and you're correct. And and look at even African Americans right now who speak, in Black history, they talk so highly of Africans, but right now they find themselves not liking each other, and that is why you find that these African Americans, what they call themselves, the people who are, they're saying that they're native to the United States. What they call them again? I forgot their names. And we had a show here, that talking about them and the Caribbean and African Blacks, and how we are divisive, that we are not together. We don't see ourselves as equally one people, right? And you go to the United States, you go to Howard University, for example, which I went to, and when you have, when you go on a campus there, you have the African Americans on one side, the Caribbeans on one side, and the Africans on another side. I'm not saying that you might not have an interlap sometimes of, cross culture and ethnicity, but the fact is that we don't see ourselves and as one people. I mean, our skin color, yes, don't get me wrong, but when it comes on to culturally, we're not the same. So that is something that we also have to look at. President Jafar is saying tribalism has always been Africans' downfall. By the way, Europeans are not this. They're not united too, They're only united against us because they don't want African people and, to win the war against Europeans. They understand that if we are united as African peoples, that we could defeat them. the Europeans, right? But they too are tribalistic, and they're, we can see the wars, the World War One, World War II, were waged against them. When you go to the United States, to the history of they didn't like the Italians, they didn't like the Irish, right, and all these people from Southern Europe that the WASP people were against in the United States. But when they came on now to the exploitation of Black people, they united, even the ones who hated each other. And if we could do that, I think we could take a playbook. If Nigerians don't like, Ghanaians, or Jamaicans don't like Trinidadians, or Trinidadians don't like Barbadians, we can come together and say, let's unite against, even though we might not like certain aspects of each other, but let's unite against these colonizers. So we need to take a page out of European books too, because they're not necessarily united as we think they are, but they unite against around a certain cause, and that is that no other group, no other national or ethnic group beat them at what they do. Can we unite, even though we might have disagreements? That is what we need to. That's a challenge for us, which many of us cannot look past. We have to be in our Jamaican skin, or Trinidadian skin, or Barbadian skin. We can't look beyond our nationality, and that's the problem. President Jafar is saying, and the African, descended, the FBAs, right? That's the FBAs that was saying that the FBAs, the ones who think that they are, the Native American blacks, and that, other Black people coming from Africa and the Caribbean, are distinct people, and they're not like African Americans. The Europeans are divided, but they are allied to keep, right, other races disempowered. Absolutely. So what if we were allied to keep the colonizers from entering our space, from entering the Caribbean region and taking and walking roughshod over us, and taking advantage of us? Don't you think that we could gain some victory here? But we never unite. It's always some flimsy thing we think about to become disunited. But the Europeans, even though they have their disunity, they fought against each other. They don't necessarily like each other, but at the same time, they unite around a certain cause. Yes, I have to. Thank you so much, Maria. We need to unite. Right? We might not like everything. I might not like the way how Jamaicans talk. I might not like the way how they're aggressive and whatever. But at the end of the day, we have to say that we're all one Caribbean people, and we need to unite around a principled action, or a group of actions, policies, whatever. Steve Knight is saying, when you talk about uniting, are you talking about the people itself or the politicians? Very good. I think I like where you're going here, Stephen. And the politicians are the ones that cause the problems. Yeah, I think we are the people, the common man, need to unite even against our politicians, because our politicians are working with the global elites. That's for sure. Right? They are working. But if we had forced them to work on our behalf, then I think that they would have to. But many of us, we just, our politicians are celebrities. That's another thing, that our politicians are no longer, servants of the people. They are celebrities, and we have to a large extent. Look at what we call them in the Caribbean. They're honorable. Honorable Mia Motley, Honorable Kamala Person-Bissessor, the most honorable Andrew Holness of Jamaica, the most honorable. Why? Why are these people the most honorable and honorable? What makes them honorable? They are our servants. We are the ones who should be honorable and most honorable, right? Because they work for us. But it's the other way around. We have made them, or we make them believe that we are working for them, that we are their servants, and that is where it is at the moment. So I think we have to change that sort of perspective. Philly's saying Europeans always united against each other, especially Western Europeans. The Western Europeans don't like each other too, as we're saying. But you're saying they're united against each other, correct? But the fact is that because the Italians don't see eye to eye with the Brits. The Brits with they're always warring, and that's why we have had the global wars that we had. Notice the global wars were also very in short order of each other. World War I, World War II. Fighting and killing hundreds of thousands of their own people. Okay. Now, President Jafar says the politician class are class loyal and seek kinship with the global elites and not the common man. Yes, but we are the ones who vote for them, and if we decide that we're going to tell them no, or you're not going to get our votes or something, put some pressure on them, then to some extent, I'm not saying they're going to listen to us 100%, but to some extent, they would have to do at least some of what we ask them to do. But right now, we're seeing where they're doing nothing that we ask them to do. They do what they want to do, and whether we like it or not, that is how they behave, right? That is how they behave. Yeah, so this is where we are now, and we are seeing the emergence of a new global infrastructure. And we are caught in this global infrastructure. Already we're seeing where we have become a what? A warlike zone. Whether we like it or not, Mrs. Kamala Person Processor was right to an extent that we no longer in the peaceful zone. Right, this Caribbean region is now like a war zone. War in terms of the battle of the mind, where we don't know what side, who we're going to side with. Are we siding with the United States? Are we siding with Venezuela? Are we siding with Iran? Are we siding with Russia? Are we siding with China? We just don't know. Or it seems like we're forced to side with the United States. Right? So again, we have wars in which the United States was in the region and shot at boats, speedboats, and there was nothing we could do. Nothing. I mean, where are the protest actions against what the United States has done in the Caribbean region? Shooting our people, right? And that's okay. It's almost like it's okay. We can't do anything about it. Now, how are we going to vouch for the people in Iran? Which we should, don't get me wrong, because they are our people too. They're human beings. But if we can't vouch for our people in our home, the people who were shot at, the people who were unalived, on speedboats right here in the Caribbean region. That was unheard of even a year ago, right? Even a year ago, that would have, if you had told me that the US was going to come here and just shoot people in Caribbean waters just because they are alleged drug dealers, then I would say, you're crazy. You're crazy. That's a conspiracy theory that you have in your head. But it's literally happening as we speak. Now, the WEF dictates our local policy now. Yeah, it's the WEF and the United Nations and all the United States. You know, the United States stands above WEF, and I tell people that the United States stands above the United Nations. They dictate what happens here, right? Stephen Knight is saying, and it's a war zone because the politicians that we called elected fail to do their job, or they decide to work for the State Department other than their people. And if they don't work for the State Department, Stephen, they're going to just have to go. That is the whole thing. But you see, one of the things that we have to tell the United States, get out of here. We don't want you here. If the entire populace come together and say, we don't want you here, it's going to be hard for them to kill all of us. You know, but for the most part, many of us, you know, are on the side with the United States. And even if our politicians stand up, and they now in CNN say that our politicians are wicked and they're evil and all of that. We believe what the United States media house says, right, about our politicians, and then they just don't do what they're supposed to do because they're afraid. You know, so it's amazing how we too, as people, can influence our politicians if we only stand up for what is right, though the heavens fall. Right? And if the United States is saying nay when we know that it is not right, we say you are not right. And we shall not stand with you. We're standing with our president. We're standing with our prime minister. We're standing with whomever we're standing for. Right? Then I think the United States can't kill all of us. I meant to say united against others. Right. Yes. Yeah. You're correct. They're united against us. Yeah. The Europeans, definitely. And I think we could take a stance where we're united against them. Africa and Caribbean people need to come together. Right? I am not sure about the African Americans because sometimes they can be very, you know, so you don't know if they're on the side of white Americans or not. And that is one of the things with us, as you know, who have gone through the colonial experience. Those of us who are part of the British Empire, where we were once a part of the British, colonies, we tend to side with, to Britain and to some extent America right now because America is the reigning empire. But when we look at what the African Americans do, when you live in America as a black person, they side with the white Americans. They curse them out all the time and they're racist and all that stuff. But when it comes onto a foreigner, a black American is going to be on the side of a white American. And that is something that is strange. It's a weird sort of relationship, but you understand that is where they grew up, right? So they like you are part of us. It's almost like you have like a Trini, Indian Trini and a black Trini or Caucasian Trini, whatever. That person is Trini. And they might have their problems there and they might have a tug of war there. But if I, as an outsider, come and want to, be a part of that conversation and curse off whatever Trini I'm cursing off or fighting with a Trini, then they're going to stand up against me because they're part of the same culture and language. So even though they might not be the same ethnic or racial group, the cultural ties cannot be refuted. And African Americans, Black Americans, they will side with their white Americans. And sometimes, whose side are they on? And whose side are Jamaicans on? Whose side are Nigerians on? Whose side are Trinidadians or Barbadians on? This is the question we have to ask. We need now to move away from this blackness and look at cultural, historical, ethnic ties, because those things are more potent than just a skin color, right? We have to move on from there. Where we have that our politician will sell all of us out for a USA visa, yes, and yeah, that is true because they want that sort of connection. Phyllis says we are still voting and over two parties in Jamaica that were created by the colonial masters to keep us divided instead of creating equalities. Absolutely, that is why they were created in the first place, to divide us and to maintain the status quo. And Jamaica, unlike any other Caribbean country, was created for that, to just keep the common man backward and to move forward a few. It has never changed. And I don't know if it will ever change because Jamaicans love it that way too, right? Again, they love it that way and they support the system. And when you speak out against the system, they don't want to hear it. Oh, you're PNP or you're GLP, yeah? They don't want to think objectively and independently. So we have President Jafar saying, yes, I do not trust African Americans at all, and I'm American born. Them talk, they revolutionaries, but they love white people. They do love white people. I'm not going to lie to you. And they say it about us too. They say it about Caribbean people too, that we tend to like white people. We might have to also take an introspective look at ourselves. Do we really like white people? And Mr. Pereira and I have said on many times on the show that our Caribbean leaders tend to be afraid of white people. When they come to these meetings, they're very much in awe of them. And it's almost like they sign off to any contracts that white people present to them. So it's not only African Americans, we ourselves in this region might have to take an introspective look at ourselves to see also if we likewise are subservient to white people. But it's a fact that African Americans, and I taught there for many years and interacted with them, and at the end of the day they talk a talk, but behind the scenes you have to watch your back because they're on the side of the white man. Particularly if you are Caribbean or African born, they don't see you as a part of the group. No matter how you think they see you as, it's not going to be the case. Okay, so that is, I'm just saying, I'm not talking now against Caribbean or African Americans. I'm just saying these are some realities that we face. And unless we come together and speak openly about these, foibles, these weaknesses, then all of these, international wranglings, and we can read all we want to read. If we don't come together as a people and recognize that we have to unite to be able to fight against these challenges, then no matter what happens, we're already defeated. And some of us, our eyes are still on Iran and who is winning, as I'm saying, who is losing, because again, we are in the sports competition. Who won? Who won? But it's not like that. Wars are just not who won and who lost when it comes on to war, particularly when it comes on to world wars. It's not just who won or who lost. It's much more nuanced than that. Okay. Let's move on to some another question. And I'm happy that you're responding. I'm just not getting the what you call it now, the sort of distribution on this platform that I would like to see YouTube do, so that we can have, a much more fervent discussions, because these are some things that we need to understand and need to be discussing. Let me ask, let us move on. Now, who really holds power today? Governments, corporations, or global institutions? That's another important question. Who really holds power today? Governments, corporations, or global institutions? Who do you think holds the power? Who owns our government? Do you think the governments are in charge, or corporations are in charge, or are there global institutions like the WEF that are in charge? I love all my people in the diaspora. I am very wary of their loyalties. Yes, yeah, you're correct. You're correct. And even among us too, when we go to the United States, Jafar, even those Caribbean and African people in the United States, you also have to be careful of them, because they also change. And they have to adapt to the cultural norms that are in the States. And they change and they behave like the people to survive. So I think it behooves us to understand what culture is about and how culture affects us and changes us into being sometimes that we don't even aware that we have changed, into being that we aren't even aware that we have changed into. Yes, all of them. Yeah. So it's something that we have to think about. I challenge this Black studies all the time. I say, what purpose if we're just sitting in a library talking about, all of these Black people and our heroes, and yeah, it's wonderful. But at the end of the day, what are we using it to do? How much of it is empowering us? And that is the credit we all have to give to Marcus Garvey. Few men have been able to merge praxis with theory. And he was able to do that. He mastered that. He mastered that like no other person. Build institutions while he was giving his great propaganda talk about Africa and whatever he was doing. We might say, yes, he had foibles, he had weaknesses, right? But all men do have weaknesses and foibles. But he was doing and talking. And few of us are able to do that. You have to give him his credit. We have Marie saying global institutions such as the WHO, WEF, the IMF, and World Bank, etc. These are the institutions, the global institutions that run our Caribbean countries. People, are you seeing them? The IMF, WHO, the WEF, and the World Bank. And as she said, etc. Okay? The United Nations. These are the global institutions that run the show in our Caribbean region. The governments are just, pawns. They are just the image, the face of the country, but they don't run the show. They don't run the show. And as Mr. Perrer says, when they get in, if they even believe, remember when Marco Rubio went to Jamaica last year and he was criticizing how the Cuban doctors and how they were linked to, the violation of labor laws. And Andrew Holness stood up and said that it was not so. And he gave his talk and people thought this guy was wearing the pants. No sooner had Marco Rubio left than he realized that, look here, you have to get rid of the doctors. Right? And this is what we're saying. And we have to see these things for what they are. That they allow them to speak as if they have this autonomy so that it doesn't look as if the United States controls everything we do. But behind the scenes, and if you listen to them carefully, and if you see what they do after these people visit the country, then you understand that they don't run the country. That they don't run the country. Okay? We have here Philly saying that they said Caribbean and especially Africans, they undermined them and said racism does not exist in U.S. Among other things. Yes, if that's what you're saying, that the white Americans sometimes will use us to divide each other, and I think that Caribbean people are able. We didn't grow up with that sort of racial divide to a large extent. So when we go to the United States, we don't go there to look at racial hostilities, even though we see it and we feel it. We move on. African Americans lived with it. It more affects them. It is a part of their cultural fabric and makeup. So they pay more attention to it. And then when we now don't pay so much attention and move on, because we know what we're there for, then they say that we love white people, and then lots of different assertions are said and made. I don't know if Caribbean people go there to worship the white man. I certainly think that they understand that they are in a predominantly what you call white society, so they maneuver their path very cautiously to achieve what they need to achieve. So I think that is, and many African Americans don't understand that. They see that as being submissive. We have Stephen Knight says there should be a discussion on how the IMF, yes, we need to have that discussion on how the IMF and other predatory, it could be the next live banks operate after. That is probably our biggest problem. Yeah, because economically, that is how they defeat us, right? As we're saying, slavery was largely an economic system. We tend to just see it as some people working for, but yeah, it's labor, so that's why it was economic. So it was largely an economic system. And the IMF and the World Bank and their neoliberal agenda, largely an economic system to enslave us economically, financially. So that will never grow, that will never build our economies, that will always be set back because we didn't accomplish this benchmark, and they talk all their talk and they sound astute. Don't get me wrong. If you're stupid, they sound so, everything sounds plausible and organized. And yes, we can't borrow more than than we spend and all that stuff. These are some truths that they're talking. At the same time, they're not there to build us. They're not there to see us become autonomous states. They want to control us economically. They want to enslave us, and that is what they do. And then we have Jafar saying, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy." That is That is exactly what Wef is saying. We should not own anything. And don't we see in the Caribbean what they've done in Jamaica? They've bought up all the beaches. People in Jamaica cannot really access for the most part, their own beaches because of the laws. And the video I made yesterday, which you should go and watch, was that PJ Patterson, a former Jamaican prime minister, was saying, "Oh, we should integrate our parish." Now, when he was prime minister of Jamaica in the 1990s and to the early 2000s, what did he do? Right? He did everything that the U.S. wanted him to do. He privatized the entire Jamaican economy. Right? We lost the entire manufacturing base, gone. Beaches, gone. Okay? The natural resources, gone. Everything in Jamaica is privatized. It's just, the whatever electric company, whatever company, you name it, privatized. What do we even own? When I heard some Barbadians speaking about the same thing on a TikTok video. What do we really, they were asking, what do Barbadians own in their country? Right? And it's tourism, and we are this, and we have to have tourism. And we're not saying we shouldn't have tourism. Tourism should be part of our cultural fabric, but it should not be the main. And if it is the main, we are the ones who should own the hotels, or local people. But that's not what we have now. We have mainly our leaders, not leaders, the private sector, I should say, and foreign investors are the ones who own the hotel industry, the hotel sector. So we're not benefiting from tourism per se, right? That is also another form of enslavement, and a model that is not congruent to economic liberty. And Mr. P.J. Patterson, he was behind that. He was behind that, We have here Stephen Knight is saying that a lot of us do not know what the word austerity means. Yeah, and when we go there, we have to explain it to them. And maybe I try to, if we could get a guest on, or Stephen Knight, if you want to come on, and we can. Some of you, if you want to chime in and we have a discussion, no problem, chime in. All of you, you are here as much to participate, and I will definitely put you in the live, and you can chat with us. President Jafar, all of you, some of you are giving some very professional and educational points. So when you want to join a live and you have a topic too, you can let me know, and you can also co-host it with me. No problem with me. Barbados is closely following Jamaica. Hotels and condominiums buying up all our beachfront property. Exactly. I think Jamaica has always been the model for what the technocratic, or what you call it now, technocratic societies will be. We were the model of the Caribbean. We are still the model of the Caribbean, and we're proud. I think when people see these high-rise buildings going up, they say, "Wow, the country is developed," right? And they're lovely and they look pretty. But do they belong to us? No. Now we have Stephen Knight is saying nothing we own, nothing they claim, that every time we get in debt, we got to sell off this and that. Exactly what they do. It's always that. I remember, when the IMF went back to Jamaica in 2008, and there was this pilot of Air Jamaica that didn't want the airline, because they said the airline had to be sold. Air Jamaica had to be sold. And that airline was a part of Jamaica, the soul and the heart of Jamaica. But at the same time, to be frank, it was also a debt, sort of ridden, transport system, right? And the fact is that something had to be done with that debt. But there was a pilot who used to, ride the plane, and he thought that pilot the plane, and he thought that he could find, friends of his and investors to buy the plane and to make it become more profitable, right? And the Jamaican government told him no, and then sold Air Jamaica to Trinidadians, and eventually he killed himself. Well, it's alleged. I don't know if he killed himself, but afterwards I think they said he committed suicide. He died. But the fact is to show you that there are some patriotic citizens who he was willing to buy the thing. Why didn't the government meet with him to see how he was going to finance it? To finance Air Jamaica. And I'm not saying that if he didn't have a credible plan, the government should not have refused it. But the government refused to even have a discussion with him about, buying out and having shares in the airline. An airline that he was closely attached to and wanted to save. And right now I'm hearing that Caribbean Airlines is having a terrible problem. They probably are. It's going to go down too. We have here that President Jafar is saying, my grandmother's house was moved and relocated from the beach where I was raised. Yeah. So it's happening in Barbados too, right? And then we have is saying that fact is racism is Caribbean. We just didn't notice it. But when think about it, it was built on the backs of racism and colorism, absolutely systematically. It just less covert. Yes. The thing about it, though, one of the things that we have to do, we have two sides to the story. There are some of us who use racism as a means, and to some extent, some African Americans do it to, what should I say now, to sort of handicap them, right? We know that there is racism, for example, in the United States, but sometimes we have to look beyond it, because there are things we cannot change, and that which we cannot change, you can't force a man or a woman not like you. You can like yourself, and you can understand who you are, and for that you live above it. Of course, if the person is holding you down physically, you have to do something. You have to knock a person or find some way to get a person off you. Yeah, but there are some times where people just imagine that there's racism and it's putting you down, and they do nothing. And some of the things that they do is just amazing. They won't go to their classes, like I taught at Howard University, right? And there are some times when they don't come to class at all, and then they come and they ask you for, they want an A for doing nothing. What life? How many white people are going to their white instructors or their white professors and tell them to give a grade? and they've not been to classes. It's not going to happen. So I think that some of the things we Black people also have really brought on ourselves, and we have to be introspective. Okay, in some cases we have to be introspective, and we have to be held accountable. And let me say, sometimes too, sometimes it's out of some very grueling circumstances that we grow and we become strong, right? And we become formidable leaders. Since the whole, what you call it now, the division there between blacks and whites in America, except the segregation. After segregation, American blacks became very weak because they were no longer going through grueling circumstances. It was out of those grueling circumstances that African Americans produced some very formidable people in their culture. The likes of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we had also Malcolm X's and all these great people that they and lots of them. We're just naming a few. A lot of them, because of those hard times. Now that we have fallen on it's a little bit better than it used to be. We have become weaker, and we don't think we have to work as hard. Okay, and we find ourselves in the Caribbean too, also mimicking that sort of behavior, and we have to grow up too. The Stephen Knight is saying the failure of these airlines are all by design, in my opinion. Like I said before, they do not want Black people self-sufficient. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what is happening. That if you notice that we're going right back on the plantation because they're selling out everything now to white people, and this is now where I will say the white black sort of thing, because this is true. This is true. And I'm not saying now, there are some Black people like the pilot who wanted to buy the Air Jamaica pilot, who wanted to buy the airline and had other investors who were willing to invest in the airline, and the government of Jamaica said no. And his pride did not allow him to spare his life. It was so sad. And I knew that, well, I know him in terms of I used to sit at Air Jamaica watching him moving back and forth as a pilot. Proud to be a very prominent, pilot of Air Jamaica. And the government just would not allow him, but they sold it to others. Well, Trinidadians are not necessarily there. I don't know if they were white people, white Trinidadians that they sold it to. I don't know. But that was what happened, and we're seeing it a lot in the Caribbean. And nothing was wrong to say to a Caribbean, person. Nothing is wrong. We're part of the Caribbean region. But it's how it was done that I'm suggesting that it was really sad. If we believe in the free market, I think everybody should come with their proposal, and the best proposal. If the Trinidadians have the best proposal than the Jamaican pilot, then they should get it. But they didn't even listen to him and his proposal. Philly Yardy is saying we should take a page from Singapore for a true tourism model, okay? Despite 20x yearly visitors than Jamaica, right? Yeah. Can you imagine? And look at the DR also, the Dominican Republic. Last year they had about 11 million, 12 million tourists. How many Jamaicans had? 5 million, 6 million? I don't know. It is only 5% of their GDP. Correct. We should take a lesson and learn lessons from them. But we like to talk, and will the United States allow us to do that? That's another thing. We are some little colonies. We are not direct colonies of the United States, but we are indirect colonies of the United States. So the United States might not allow us to do that because they're the ones who control, for the most part, the tourism sector in the Caribbean, the U.S. We have no control over the hearts of men, right? We only control our lives. Absolutely. And that is why we can talk about racism, but we can't spend, 80% of our times, emphasizing the white man's. In fact, when we talk about him so often, we make him seem to be more important than he or she is, right? We spend our times talking about white people, the white man, and we make him or her more important than they are. If we don't pay them attention, there are some people who like to bully you and they want you to look at them and pay attention. And that's the time I don't pay them any attention when they want to behave as if I should be looking at them. Because when you don't look at them now, they understand that you don't regard them and that you're not a part, they don't play a big role in your life. They're not even seen in your life. If you are financially empowered, you do not care if people like you are not, right? And that is the thing. China is the greatest example of this. Yeah, so China doesn't care. Yeah, China is focused and their people are focused too. Yeah, and I think black people should also be focused and don't care if the white man, the Chinese, or the Russian, or whomever don't like you. Doesn't matter. I mean, don't get me wrong. It matters if people like us. We're human beings. Nobody likes to be hated. But at the end of the day, if you know that you are doing the right thing, the principled thing, then you don't care. You shouldn't care. If you're taking and behaving the way how decent, law-abiding citizens should behave and think. Yeah, this is a great sort of live, and it's great to see that we are attuned to what is happening in the world and how these things are affecting us here in the Caribbean region, because we need critical discourses like that. Now, are we entering a new global order? And is this just another cycle of history? Do you think that this is just another thing to be passed around and we'll go into another era? And if we're transitioning into another era, what era do you think we are transitioning into? What new world order? What is going to be the order of the day of that system which they are transitioning us into? Do you know? What is it going to be called? How are we going to behave? The everyday life. What is it going to be like? Do we know? Where are we going? Where are we heading to? Is it going to be capitalism, or is it going to be communism? Is it going to be socialism? Is it going to be technocracy, as some of us are suggesting that we're going to be heading into a technocratic age where the elites are going to employ experts to control us and governments won't be needed? Your government will be your expert, your scientific experts, as we had during COVID, right? That the scientists should tell us how we should lead our lives. And they tell us if we can go outside or if we should remain at home. Where are we heading to in this new global order? Which is no longer by the way, a conspiracy theory. It is what we're living now. We're living now in new world order, and this is what we are experiencing now. This is not business as usual. This is not the order of yesterday. Where are we going? Where are we heading to at the moment? We have a response here. There were less unity among Black Americans when it became less segregated as a correct. And that is why, I asked, what's her name, when Kimberly was on my program the other day, when she came on the program, do we even have a Black community in the United States anymore? Yes, during segregation and slavery, we had a Black community because Black people were united, were mobilized around a common cause. But as Phil is saying, after segregation and the integration of Black Americans, I think the Black community faded, because what you call Black people in America they all have different agendas. Whether you belong to the middle class or, the working class, people have different agendas, right? And they don't necessarily see eye to eye with the working class Black and stuff like that. Hebrew is saying that greetings, if it is going to be UNIA, Marcus Garvey style Negroes nations by common ancestor moving together like the EU, Asian, etc., etc. Yeah, you can see where you're going with that. Yeah, I think that we would have to, join something of the UNIA and Marcus Garvey's vision for the Black race becoming self-sufficient. Now, Marcus Garvey was not suggesting that we cannot have relationship with white people. What he was suggesting that we have to put ourselves first, and we must ensure that we build for our people. We must ensure that we look out first for the interest of our own people, and that is what other people do. The Chinese and the Hebrew, the Israel, the Jews, all these people look out for their own people. But somehow Black people which just stand in the foreground and support a group, whether they're Chinese or they're Russians or, although I don't think we're going to support Jews, right? I don't think we are going to support Jews at all, but we are going to sit down in the background and support one of these people or one of these groups. And what are we doing for ourselves? What are we doing for ourselves? That is, antithetical to what Marcus Garvey was actually um, preaching. Yeah. So I think we have to change our ways, and we have to look at things much more objectively and independently. I think, when we talk about the Black community also, one of the things that really irks me is when we think all of us behave the same way or should behave the same way. We should all think the same way, and it's not so. Right? We all have different ways of thinking, and because we're human beings. And I'm not saying there are certain core values that we should agree on. Like, we should be anti-slavery. We should also be anti-Western imperialism. We should be anti in Jamaica or in the Caribbean, them wanting to come and buy out our land and sell out our land. These are things that we should unite around. But there are things that we're going to have, differences on. But the things that will empower us are things that we should unite around, and the fighting against the common enemy, right? Which we have not been doing over the years because we have different interests, and so I don't think there's a Black community. I think that there's an imagined Black community, but in America, it's just fractured people that you have there. You probably have a more wide community than a Black community, because at least, as we're saying, that they unite around a certain cause, we don't. So how can we rebuild the Black community should be the question, right? That it should be the underlying comment. How are we going to rebuild the Black community in the United States versus there is a Black community, which there isn't? So these are the things. Everything is, Black people are living off the legacy of the past. We talk about Marcus Garvey, we talk about, all these national heroes and heroines, but we don't live their, we don't preach, we don't live what they preach or what they preached in the past, do we? Right? We only, yearn for them, yearn for the existence of Africa. We want to go back home and how we were kings and queens in Africa, right? But the fact of the matter, if we're not kings and queens right now, it doesn't matter, right? White people, oh, these people are kings and queens back in, the 1500s or the 1600s. It's not going to, well, they don't see it as that. You have to be kings and queens now, and we have to make ourselves. Look at Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey the king, Marcus Garvey the businessman, Marcus Garvey the professor, Marcus Garvey the military man. Even in an age when people thought Black people were nobodies, Marcus Garvey was dressing himself as a king, as as a businessman, right? As a professor. And he dressed according to how he felt every day, or whatever audience that he had to address, right? So we need to do that too, and we need to function more on, yes, Marcus Garvey spoke about the past too, because we have to understand the past, but we also have to live in the present. And we have to show them that Black people can build institutions, can build transportation systems, as Marcus Garvey did, can build schools, can build libraries, can build armaments if we need to, so that we can protect ourselves. But we're relying on Africa, on Iran and China and Russia, right, for our tools of defense. Yeah, we're building them up, in other words. Okay, so it's a very difficult times in which we find ourselves. The times that we had that were a little bit better, we did not use that time wisely, and now we are caught in a system that is going to be very difficult to extricate ourselves from. As we said, slavery had to go. And I'm sure the poor slaves didn't want the violence. They didn't want people to, for the Civil War to happen and for things to happen that violently. They didn't want it. Our slaves were peaceful people, right? They just wanted slavery to end. But because these people were so bent, it gave them lots of wealth, they were not going to have it go down. So it had to have gone down violently. Had to go down in the most violent way. And now we find ourselves that we want to extricate ourselves from the IMF and from other, slave-like and abusive situations. And yet still, if we want to do that, it's not going to go down peaceful. That much I can tell you. Because these guys want money. And the IMF has set up a system that sucks suck you dry until you give them everything that you have economically, financially. And they love it and they're not going to stop it. It's like a mosquito. He's not going to stop sucking you until you kill it. Right? So that is what is happening now. And we find ourselves in a situation where, one, knowledge is not very much accessible here in terms of understanding what is happening really in the world. I think we're much caught up in what is happening on the domestic scene, right? And what PNM is doing to, the UNC, Mrs. Kamala Person Bicester, she's been calling what a GEMET or GMET, whatever they call her. And we spend a long time talking about these crazy stuff and, and then afterwards, nothing is achieved. Nothing is achieved. Because at the end of the day, we don't understand what is happening in the geopolitical realm and how that is going to destroy us. Those happenings, those developments are meant to destroy us and to enslave us. Right? So this is where we find ourselves. Can we extricate ourselves? Maybe, but it's going to have to be done violently. Are we willing to participate in those violent activities? Because it's not going to happen where it's going to go down nicely. Somebody protests and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to give back Trinidadians their rights, or Barbadians or Jamaicans or Guyanese. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to be something that we have to fight for. And that fight, because of what the wealth that these people have generated, it's going to have to go in a violent, it's going to be achieved in a violent way. Are we ready for that violence? Any other question? Any other comments? Let me hear from you now. I think I have spoken a lot. I think I can hear from you now. Speak. What do you think? What is going to happen to us? What are we ready for violence? Are we ready to liberate the Caribbean from what we find ourselves in? Can we really liberate ourselves? And let's not depend on our prime ministers and our leaders, our political leaders. They're not going to liberate us. Our Caribbean leaders are not going to liberate us, right? So we have to think of creative ways and means to liberate and emancipate ourselves. Not going to liberate us. They are part of an elite group that are going to enslave us. And remember now that not all of them understand the agenda. So we can't blame all leaders that we see. We have to pray for them. We have to educate them too. We also have to help to educate our politicians. When we can write them a letter or two, we should, and be responsible citizens and let them know how we feel, how we think about the Cuban doctors. We can post a video and we can let them know how we think about what they're doing and say we love you, but we can't agree with what you're doing here, so we can be responsible citizens. Because some of them don't know any better. That's one. They don't have the education to understand the perception, the discernment, to see what is happening in the world. Even though they are part of government, does not mean that they understand everything that is happening in the geopolitical realm and the ultimate agenda. They don't always understand it. All right. So we also have to be patient with them and educate them through our own humble means, letters, videos, whatever means, a talk, going to their office to sit and talk with them for a few minutes. And sometimes if we're respectful, you might find that they appreciate it and, learn something from us. And we can work together to create a better Trinidad society, Trinidad and Tobago society, Jamaican society, Barbadian, Guyanese, Antiguan, wherever you're from, Grenadian, right? So I think that is what we have to do now. I think we also need to work collaboratively with as many of our leaders who are willing to listen. But let's not write all of them off and think that they're all mean-spirited and they're wicked and they're all a part of the elites, right? I hope sometimes I don't sound like that, because not everybody is, and there are some very good politicians. They're not in the majority, but the ones who are in the minority, and even the ones who might be in the majority who are not working on our behalf, if they should be educated and they come to an awareness, they might just change path. All right, so let's not write them off fully. Let's be responsible. Let's be understanding, right? So that we can gain as much from them. Because at the end of the day, they're in leadership positions and they have power to sign a letter or, do something of influence that will affect our lives. So we have to also be very cautious in how we approach them, and we ought to be respectful as far as their office is concerned. Right? So I'm not here to be anti-politician. I'm not here to be anti-leaders. I'm not here for you to say that you should hate your leaders. I'm here to say that these are the realities. We have to face them. How do we rechart, a different country, a different path from the path on which we are treading? No? So, yeah. Any response? Any comments based on our title? Remember, our title, for those of you who are just coming in, it's COVID, Iran, and the Great Reset. Is a new global order emerging? Are we entering a new world order? And how, as citizens of the Caribbean, are we faced? Are we ready? I should say, are we ready for this new global order that we see is emerging? Are we ready? Any comments? Any questions? Anything that you want to ask? It doesn't have to be related to the topic. We can talk about anything before we end this discussion. And make sure you're sharing the live and you are liking the live so that we can have more people join the live, so we can have, very educated discussion this afternoon. Yeah, so any questions, any comments? Any comments, any questions? The channel names I changed the name of the channel to Declassified Caribbean. How do you like it? Do you mind? Do you think it's a good name? I sort of wanted to rebrand the channel, call it Declassified Caribbean. It sounds like it's more appealing. Maybe it's not, but I just say that for marketing, for rebranding purposes, I just changed it. Any comment? Any question? Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I hope that it will be seen, and it will, nobody knows what's happening to the algorithm here on YouTube. I just find it to be a mystery. But yeah, hopefully it will be well received by the algorithm. Yeah. Any comments? Any other question? Yeah, I was, what do you think, I'm hearing rumors of Trump being sick. Have you heard that? And some people are suggesting that he was hospitalized at the Walter Reed Hospital. Have you heard anything about that? Is Trump really sick? And is he very sick? Some people are suggesting that he's also suffering or from he's suffering from Alzheimer's too. I don't know. I don't see any signs that he is suffering from Alzheimer's, but I don't know. Lots of rumors on social media. You don't know what to believe sometimes. Does anybody have any credible source that to suggest that Trump is ill, is actually in the hospital, or has been hospitalized? I don't know. I can't say if he is sick or not. Any other comment? Yeah, for those of you who are coming in, we're looking at COVID, Iran, and the Great Reset. Is a new global order emerging? Are we witnessing the emergence of a new global order? And we spoke about the fact that the petrodollar could be demolished during this war on Iran. And what are the consequences? Let us look at that. What are the consequences if the dollar should be demolished and we don't have any more the petrodollar, the petrodollar should be demolished, totally destroyed. What do you think would be some of the consequences of that? That, I think, is a very important issue that we should be looking at. What do you think would happen if the global petrodollar is removed? Any questions? Now, what do you think are some of the similarities between COVID 19 and the war on Iran? Now, we're seeing global disruptions as a catalyst, right? We're seeing that there are global disruptions in terms of, the oil prices, both COVID and the war on Iran have created what both large scale disruption in the in the case of COVID disrupted supply chains rather. So the people who are distributing foods and goods and everything, labor, travel, economies, it disrupted all of that. A war involving Iran could disrupt oil supply, shipping routes, and global markets. And we're hearing them talking about the Strait of Hormuz and how that is disrupting shipping routes, right? Major shocks, whether health or military, we tend to accelerate changes that were already on the way. And under COVID, we see what the expansion of state power, where the state was able to tell us when we should go home, what places we should go to, how we should be dressed and everything. Now, during COVID, emergency laws, lockdowns, and surveillance tools were very commonplace, right? They were ubiquitous and, of course, practiced on a daily basis. During war, we can see military authority, security measures, censorship, emergency spending. So, these are the commonalities we're seeing between COVID and the war on Iran. And these are things that we should be looking at. Economic restructuring. We saw economic restructuring during COVID. We saw stimulus. The government offered stimulus packages, debt expansion, digital payments, weakened the small businesses, right? So that was the effect of COVID. The war, we can see defense spending. That is, I understand that Trump has recently sent to Congress a payment of $1,500,000,000, if I'm calling it correctly. So defense spending is increasing. Sanctions, shifts in trade alliances, energy realignment. We're seeing all of that taking place right before our eyes. Now, what about the petrodollar, as I'm suggesting to you? What do you think is going to happen to the petrodollar? If eventually, do you think that the war on Iran is going to be the end of the petrodollar, the end of this US petrodollar? All right, let's end this here, and this is my final thoughts. History shows that major crises, whether pandemics or wars, don't just disrupt societies. They reshape systems, economic systems, power structures, even currencies, right? Even currencies, like we're talking about the petrodollar. The question isn't whether change happens, it's who benefits from that change. And that's all. What's the word? What's the Latin expression? Cui bono, right? Who benefits from that change and how permanent it becomes. If you want to connect if we want the petrodollar to remain in power, then we have to ensure that you do such and such. And I think that we're going to move from the petrodollar to a digital currency. That's my perspective. That they want to destroy the petrodollar infrastructure, even though it's not good for those of us who are part of the global south, because we know how exploitative America has been. But what are they going to change it for or into? It's going to be change. We're going to be transitioning to a digital currency economy. So that is where we're going, I think. So the change that they're actually looking for is not going to benefit us. It's going to benefit them. So even if the petrodollar goes tomorrow, it's not that the United States hegemony has died. It means that it has been digitized. And that is what we have to understand. So, COVID, we see a push for digital transactions. We saw that central bank digital currency discussions, and we talked about surveillance, COVID vaccines, that you had to give them your card and all that stuff. The war on Iran, and we are seeing, especially involving Iran, could weaken trust in existing oil-based monetary systems. And it is the petrodollar that was able to sustain America, as the global empire of the world. People are saying that if the dollar should die tomorrow, the United States is going to die as a global empire. I don't agree with that. I think if the dollar goes tomorrow, the United States is not going to be a new, maybe the first digital empire in world history. But it's not going to die. The empire is not going to die overnight. And let's be very now clear on that. The United States empire will die one of these days, but it's not going to die right now. It's not going to die overnight, even though some empires might have died overnight. But, the United States empire is relatively young still, right? It came in 1945. So it's not going to just die right now. Let's be fair to history. Let us be practical too. As much as we'd like to see it die, we can see that if it does control the digital economy that we're transitioning into, more than likely it will be here for some time. Okay? But if we don't want to see it, let me see what you guys have. We have now, he's sick. Yeah. Oh, he's sick. You're saying, Annie, that he's sick, but that depends on what you mean. Yeah. I don't know if when I say sick, I'm not, suggesting I want him to be sick. I'm just saying I'm hearing rumors, so I don't know what he has. I'm asking those of you who might have, any source, any credible source in terms of what is he sick with. Yeah, I'm not here to suggest that I want him to be sick. It's just I heard the rumors. Not just that there were rumors, but I don't know if that is true. If they are true, rather. The American economy will sink. Yes, it is sinking. America will not be able to print money like it is a monopoly anymore. Yeah, and I'm wondering, as we're saying, Annie, I'm wondering if it is going to be transforming or transitioning us into what we call a digital economy. Now, remember now that the European Union, how they were able to come together was to get rid of some of the other currencies and to join a euro. And many of the citizens in those countries lost their life savings, right? So that's what we're saying now. Is America now pushing toward a digital currency to get rid of the American dollar? So we have to look. I'm not saying it's going to happen the way I'm saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that think about it. Is that the agenda with the war on Iran? Because the war on Iran is definitely going to change the financial infrastructure. No doubt about that. By the end of this war, if there's going to be an end, there is going to be a transformation of the economic infrastructure, and it's going to determine if the United States is going to be a petrodollar run economy or it's going to be a digital, a digitized economy. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying here that the dollar won't fall. It will fall. The dollar, but are they orchestrating a fall, a total collapse, an engineered collapse, so that they can transition us rather into a global digital economy? That is my point. I don't know, but I'm asking. Any other comment? Any questions? When should we do another live? When should we do another live? And should we talk about the IMF and austerity, as Stephen Knight suggested? And when on the other lives, can we share the live before we come on the platform so others can get it? So when they come to the live, people will come, more people can come. So the algorithm, I don't know what is happening to it, but we have to prod it along. Share the videos on your YouTube, not your YouTube, your Facebook and other social media platforms, so that people will see. That's the only way that we will get people to watch and to participate, so that we can educate the Caribbean Why? Because we are doing that. That is what all of us are doing here on the platform. So when you send your messages and we're responding, that is what you're doing. You're educating your fellow citizens. And we are alerting them as to what is ahead, what lies ahead of us. Because what lies ahead is not pretty. What lies ahead of us is definitely not pretty. I mean, he is a psycho. Oh, that's what you mean. Doesn't that mean that he's sick? Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying that he's been sick from day one. That's what you're saying, Annie. I understand it. Yeah, from day one. I was referring to physical illness, but here, yeah, he is a psycho, and Trump is mentally ill. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think we can agree on that, whether we like him or not, that Trump is in fact a. But Annie, I think Annie, you tend to like Mrs. Kamala person, but well, I like her too. But you tend to be on her side. You defend her a lot, and she is a defender of Donald Trump, isn't she? Right? She says she agrees with everything he's doing, 100%. So yeah, you have to be careful, Annie, because Mrs. Kamala personal possessor will come for you, calling her role model a psycho. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but any other comment? Any other comment? Any other question before we go? Make sure you're liking the live, you're sharing it on your YouTube pages, on your Instagram, anything where you can share it. Those of you who can also cut, like you can cut segments of it, please do that, because I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. If I want to cut segments of my live, what program can I use to do that? Can anyone tell me, teach me how to do it? Because I would like to cut sometimes segments of the live into short portions and probably send them out. Because sometimes people don't want to watch the full live. So if I can cut it into bits and pieces and retitle them, then people will be more interested in watching them. Any suggestions of what software I could use to cut segments of the video, of the live? Where are we going? Any questions? Any further comments? Those of you who are joining, please like the video. We're looking at COVID, Iran, and the Great Reset. Is a new global order emerging? That's what we're looking at this afternoon. And I'm wondering if there's any comment, any other question? All right, so if there's no other comment or question, I think that is safe. We can go now. It's Happy Easter. Hope you had a fantastic holiday period. And you ate your, in Jamaica, they eat bun and cheese. What do people in Trinidad have for Easter? Do you have bun and cheese also, or is there a different practice? What do you do during Easter in Trinidad? You're not on camera side. Okay. I was just kidding. Okay, you're not on camera side. Okay, fair enough, Annie. Yeah, what do people in Trinidad eat for Easter, like an Easter tradition? Do you have buns there too? Eggs, fish? Barbados, what do you have, frying fish, or do you have buns too? What's the typical, anywhere you're coming from, what do you have for Easter? What's your Easter snack, or what do you mostly eat during the holidays? Good Friday into Easter Sunday, into Easter Monday. Any comments? All right. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will like the video. Please like the video, put a like on it, and please share it. And those of you who can send me probably via my email any software that you use to cut segments of the video, so I can send out in bits and pieces different parts of the different segments of the video. Then I can do that so that people will be more eager and probably motivated to watch the full video eventually. Thank you so much for joining, and have yourselves a great holiday. And I see you another live maybe on Wednesday, right? I'll decide if Wednesday or Tuesday will be the next live. Annie is saying that I disagree with many things she's doing, but if there is something that she's doing well, You're correct, and I do that, I'm the same too. I don't know if there's anything she's doing well right now. I must say, and I want to be fair to her, but I don't know if Mrs. Carol Prasad is doing anything that is great right now. I think everything is misinformed, and she's just following Trump holistically, which is not good. Yes. Is it hot cross buns? Yes, Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, you have hot cross buns. Is that a spicy bun too? I've eaten many buns, good buns from Trinidad and Tobago, and particularly from Tobago. I mean, they really make some nice buns and breads and whatever. I'm not sure if I ever had the hot cross buns, and fish as well. Right, most of the Caribbean people eat fish. In fact, now many people in Jamaica are now moving away from bun and cheese, and many people are eating bun and fish. People are saying that now that is the die for. Back in the days, people just used to eat predominantly bun and cheese, but now they're saying bun and fish is what people are actually eating, than bun and cheese. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I agree with you, Annie. I think that we should not necessarily agree with everything our leaders do, but whenever they do something well, we should applaud them. We should congratulate them. That is the principled approach to take for any leader. Yeah. Any other comment? Question? Thank you so much for joining. And we will look at, let me see another one. The hot cross buns are slightly sweet. Yes, yes. I used to like anything coming out of Trinidad, but particularly Tobago. Those people can cook. Wow. And I mean, I used to have I would say, adopted mother from Tobago, and she would cook some lovely dishes that were so sumptuous. And I don't know why you take so long to see the comments. Oh yeah, I don't know. Normally I read them as soon as they're posted. To be frank, I read them as quickly as I see them. Yeah, but yeah, yeah, I don't know too. Maybe it's lots of things are happening at YouTube I don't understand. So I just have to do the best I can do with YouTube. Yeah, yeah. So is any other comments? Thank you so much for joining, and hopefully we'll have another live. Look out for the thing on Tuesday or on Wednesday. I'll try to have another one. Perhaps we'll look at the IMF and the World Bank and austerities. Hopefully you will invite other people into the live on Tuesday or Wednesday. Try to send over, as soon as you see the notification, send out the live to your neighbors, your family, your friends, so that they can come and be a part of that discussion, and they can also come with their insights to participate in the live on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll send out the notification as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining, and happy Sunday. See you in another one. Ciao.